Hi, everyone. Welcome. Svava Brooks here. I am so happy that you're joining us for another interview here on the Journey to the Heart, where I am chatting with experts and professionals who are sharing their unique approach to thriving after trauma. So today we are in for a treat. I'm here talking to Darlene Ouimet. Welcome, Darlene.
Hi, Svava. Thank you so much for having me.
We always have so much fun. We just started off on a tangent before we even started recording, so we're going to have fun. But before we go into our questions, I just want to tell our audience a little bit about you. You have quite an amazing background, and from one survivor to another, I was just telling you how much I appreciate all the important work that you do in the world. But let me tell the audience a little bit about you if they don't already know you. So Darlene Ouimet is a professional life transition coach and an emotional healing expert with a very busy private practice and working with clients all over the world, right? We got to love the internet. In 2010, this Canadian writer launched Emerging from Broken, and it took off like a rocket. And today is one of the most popular blogs on the topic of healing. Her unique, candid, and heartfelt message touches readers deeply. The no-nonsense approach that I love about you, Darlene. Today, our Darlene improves countless lives each and every day by delivering hope and inspiration and empowering her readers and clients with the message of hope and healing after depression, abuse, or dysfunctional family dynamics. Darlene believes that really living, is not just getting from one day to the next, coping with those issues. It's living fully, embracing life, and participating in it, right? Living wholeheartedly, as I say. It's about knowing who you really are and not being defined by your past or by any other person. You can read Darlene's blog and find her books, The Beginning of Hope for Emotional Healing, at emergingfrombroken.com. And you will see the links underneath this video, encouraging our audience to go definitely visiting your blog, and your Facebook page is phenomenal. Lots of interaction going on there. So welcome, Darlene.
Thank you, Svava. Thank you so much.
So I just want to start with you. You're such a huge advocate for victims of child abuse and survivors of abuse and emotional neglect. Tell us a little bit about what you specialize in as an advocate.
I specialize in helping people who have, struggle with depression, who have struggled with depression and low self-esteem, by showing them like where the broken began, is how I put it. We weren't born that way, and when we've been neglected or devalued, discounted, abused, or traumatized in any way by anyone, it gives us a message about ourselves, and unless someone stepped in and helped us. So if we were left to figure this out by ourselves as children, there's a message that is associated with the trauma or abuse or the neglect, and the message is a false message about who we are. Now, in order to survive, we have to take on the blame. Like we don't see it as, I can make this person change, I can make my mom love me, or I can make my mom stop being mean to me. We think, I can make my mom love me if I try harder. And it's not just, it could be that your mom didn't listen to you about abuse. It doesn't have to be that your mom is the abuser or your dad or whatever. So it's the damage that is caused by the trauma that gets stuck in the way, because our coping methods as children have to be a certain way. And we just try harder. And we cope by dissociating, we cope by eating too much, or all kinds of things like that. So because there's so much brainwashing involved in that false message, we go forward not even knowing that we believe these false things about ourselves. We're so convinced that it's us. As we get older, we start to wonder, the hell's wrong with me? Why can't I go forward? Why am I stuck? Why am I always sad? Why am I not grateful? There's all these things that we do that we question. And the question is not what's wrong with me, it's what happened to me. And that's what I help people see. And it's really amazing when that people think they know, but they don't realize the message that's at the behind of it all, like the back of it. So there's a real foundation that is actually not that hard to get to if we can just switch the way we look at it.
Mm-hmm.
So in a nutshell, that's what I do. And how I write my blog, my passion was always to just help people see the hope that there is freedom, that there is wholeness on the other side of all of this. And so the way I write my blog is I try to write it showing how I realized those false messages and how I looked at the way things happened and the way that things were said to me and the way that I was dismissed or discounted and what I believed about myself because of it and how I realized that it wasn't the truth about me.
Mm-hmm. That's beautiful. You said so much there. I mean, because we are so small when a lot of this happens and our brain hasn't even fully developed, it becomes part of our subconscious, like our automatic thinking without even we having any control over it. And then we project that out to the rest of the world. And that's kind of what we expect, right? And we normalize this behavior. And then, like you said, if we only can change, if we can only become better, then we'll be loved, then we'll get it right, then people will help us, right?
Right.
And so, I know for me on my healing journey, it was very powerful to hear other survivors say, yes, me too. And I'm like, really? I thought I was the only one this broken. I thought I was the only one with this crazy thinking. And once you understand the education piece, no, you're just a textbook example of what happens to a child that is treated a certain way growing up. And that's where the hope comes, I think. It's like, oh my God, there's nothing wrong with me. I can fix this. And that's the good news, I think, now in the world. There's so much coming out about how we can change that. So let's talk about that. How do you address, you call it the changing the handwriting from the past when it comes to moving forward once you realize this?
Right. So many people think that changing the handwriting means that we can actually change the story, but it's not changing the story, it's changing how we see the story. So the abuse, the trauma, it all stays the same. But when we look at the message through a different viewpoint, then we can see that what we have come to accept is not really what happens.
How do you explain the changing of your minds, so we can move from the self-doubt to self-love?
Okay. We can't actually change the past. So some people think that rewriting the story means trying to convince ourselves it happened differently. Some therapists even teach that, like they teach you a new script. But it doesn't actually work because all of this happens in the subconscious anyways, like all of the belief system lives deep down in there. So what I do is I help people to change the way that we look at it. So in my own story, I learned like to see it through a different grid, a more truthful grid. Now the problem with that is the reason that we've coped successfully for so long as children is that we have not faced the pain of the truth. So how could an adult do this to me? That's so painful if we actually realize like they did because it means they completely disregarded us as a person, as a human being with feelings, and just objectified us, or didn't care enough to take care of us, or whatever the situation is. Mm-hmm. So I started in. So that's why one of the reasons why survival mode is like not really looking too deep. So one of the things that I learn to do and I help other people to do is to look at the actual event. And even though it's painful, once I saw the truth about that it wasn't me, that someone did this to me, that someone did disregard me, that then I wasn't protected, when I told I wasn't heard or listened to, I was ignored, or I was told we don't talk about things like that, but it was never about me. Once I could see that, I could say, I knew that the trauma happened. I knew how it made me feel. And then so I validated that it happened. It wasn't my fault. It was not something I asked for. See, all those things are ways that I coped with the trauma. Like, I would say, well, if I wasn't such a naughty girl at school, or if I would did my math perfectly, my teacher wouldn't be mad at me. She wouldn't pick on me. Or if I wasn't so full of, when I was really little, I was quite full of life and dynamic until I got abused. And then but I thought if I wasn't so, talkative, I wouldn't have been targeted, and those are all lies, because the perpetrator doesn't care about any of that. They want to perpetrate. So, or they want to get their order restored by overpowering somebody else. And if that somebody else happens to be a child, then the truth is, I had no I had no way of defending myself. I had no way of stopping an adult from sexually abusing me, or even from picking on me, or I couldn't make my mother pay attention to me. I was totally powerless, and I had to see it through that grid in order to be able to face the damage and to see how that damage defined me. It was in seeing how it defined me as, like, oh, there's something wrong with me, and realizing, was there anything wrong with me? No, it wasn't my fault. That's how I was able to come out of that fog that trauma causes us to live in.
That's beautiful. I love that. I really appreciate, how explaining it like that, because I feel as survivors, we get very confused about our part, about the story. Do I have to tell the story? Do I have to feel my feelings? But like you said, it isn't our story that we've been telling ourselves, and we've been trying to justify the pain at our expense. And it's until we can, distance ourselves from it in a way that, this is what they did to me, but the hurt was real. And I have a reason. There's a good reason why this pain is here. And, for me, telling a story was me like validating the truth for myself, just
Right.
really grieving and feeling it. So once we know the truth.
Well, what I was going to say was, when we're kids, we deny it in order to survive it.
Yes.
So we can't face the pain because there's nobody there to help us. And what I realized was, as an adult, I didn't have to cope that way anymore. I could say no as an adult. I could defend myself. Even when I realized in my 40s that I was still afraid of my mother because she was physically abusive, I was still afraid of her. And when I went through I was going to draw a boundary. I was going to tell her. And the fear in me was like, I was terrified, just because I was going to tell my mother that I didn't want her to disrespect me anymore. I wasn't going to take it anymore. It was in my 40s. The fear was so strong that I sat down and I wrote, what am I afraid of? What's the worst thing that can happen? That old saying. And I wrote, I drilled down and I drilled down. And I do this with a lot of different things, that fears that come up. So I drilled down and I realized I was still afraid she would hit me. Now, my mom hadn't hit me since I was 15, because she humiliated me so badly that time that I told her, because she slapped me across the face outside and my glasses went flying across the lawn, and I told her, if you ever hit me again, I'm going to hit you back. Well, I can't believe where I got the guts to say that, but was a little smaller than me, but she didn't hit me again. But in my 40s, I realized I'm still afraid she's going to hit me. And at first I said to myself, oh, don't be ridiculous. You're 40 years old. She's not going to hit you. And then I said, wait a minute, that's the same invalidation that everyone had treated me with my whole life. And I was treating myself with that invalidation. So I said, okay, I'm going to journal about this. And I wrote, okay, what if she did hit me? What would I do? What can I do today that I couldn't do as a child?
Mm-hmm.
And that's where I realized, and I was like, I felt so feisty and so rebellious. I was like, I'll phone the cops. She hits me, I'm gonna charge her. And then I went like, you know, pretty powerful, like I was almost like feeling like, oh, you think you're so tough? Like I kept that kind of abusive voice to myself. And I said, no, like it's illegal to hit some, it's illegal to do that. And I thought, no, I'll charge her. And then I said to myself, it didn't even matter if the police listened or not. I was saying it for me. I will do this. I will never let her hit me again. Then I felt this for the first time in my life. Oh my gosh, I have a choice. I can do something to take care of myself. And in that was the first time that I had done anything like that. And I realized in that time, oh my gosh, I'm not that powerless child anymore. And that's one of the ways we can look at changing the way we see the past, right? And so that was a big thing for me. And I still use that drill. I call it drilling down. And I still use that exercise if something comes up that I'm still like feeling afraid of. We are not those children anymore. But when we were children, the only way we could cope was by blocking out the pain.
Exactly. Beautiful. Thank you. Very well said. I really appreciate that example, and that insight helps us to picture that. So good for you. And I could feel your energy, just like you took your power back. It's like, wait a minute, I'm not that little girl anymore. So
For the first time, I
yes.
took my power.
Yeah.
And it was
Beautiful.
at the same time, it was empowering. There was a lot of feelings, like I was very surprised to find out that those childhood fears were still there when I was in my 40s. And but they really, really were. I thought if my mother, like, because it was all about rejection, and rejection to a child is equal to death.
That's
So
right.
what I found, I started doing these drilling down exercises and look at the root of my fears, and it always came up with, what if she rejects me and then I will die? And I had to realize I'm not going to die anymore. I can take care of myself today. And also, when I really looked at it, she rejected me a long time ago when she wouldn't let me be me, when she wouldn't listen to me or help me when somebody had abused me. She was abusing me. But when I was just objectified in that way, sometimes my mom just hit us because she was in a bad mood, and it made her feel better to just get her energy out. So all of those things, when I started viewing them that way, I could take my power back.
That's beautiful. I love it. So now that you got your power back, right? You help your clients see that, the truth about what happened. What are some of the tools? They have the false definitions of who we are, has been kind of the root of the problem right now. And you talk about that you have a couple of tools that you help survivors use to stay on track moving forward.
So once a person sees what the root lies are about themselves, so that there's a truth thing involved in that, like, because clients have survivors, not just clients, but survivors have a way of, if you told your story to somebody, they would say, oh my gosh, like oh my goodness, that's horrible. And if you said to them, yeah, do you think that I deserved it? They would always say, no way. But when it comes to the person themselves, what we think we must have done something to deserve it. It's almost as if, and it sounds almost conceited, but it's not at all. It's almost as if we say, everybody else was mistreated, but I think I deserved it. People would write me on my blog and say, oh my gosh, my childhood was nowhere near as worse as yours. And I would think, or no, nowhere near as bad as yours. And I would think, what do you think happened to me? Like, because I didn't think it was. And the thing is, when it comes to abuse, there is no worse. It's all the worst. It's all your story. So once the foundation is set where we see, what happened through the grid of truth, then we can say, was it my fault? Because I use them sometimes, like I use I found out that I was using these little things I had done. Like one time I bit my brother's cupcake and tried to hide it with icing. and I got caught. And I used that little tiny thing to prove that I was a terrible child, and no wonder I was abused and neglected because I was really rotten. And so we have to look at, those things. If you have a story like, well, I rebelled and I hit my mother back when I was 5, or whatever, doesn't mean that you deserved all of the things that happened. So there's the truth factor, and then I like to do motive work, especially when we start taking our power back as adults and we're saying, like, no, you can't talk to me that way anymore. You can't treat me that way anymore. I'm not going to accept your definition of me as nothing anymore. Um, there's a lot of struggle in there, I find, with people who, because they feel like when they set a boundary that they're exactly like the abuser, because the abuser always said, you do that and I'm going to do this. There'll be a consequence and you'll go to your room, or you'll get a beating, or whatever it was, right? So when I set my boundaries, I got scared. And when I looked at that, the thing that helps me with that is looking at the motive. So what is my motive for saying no, or my motive for asking for help? Is it for power, or the abuse of power, or is it for love because I want loving relationship? When I set my boundaries with my family, I wanted love. I wanted us to have a healthy, loving relationship going forward. When they said no, I made a new decision. I wasn't going to put up with that anymore. But my motive was not for control. And that is a really big tool that will reveal a lot of information when you do that work. So looking at their motive versus my motive. Now, I mean, sometimes we find, yeah, my motive is because I want my own way, but it's not usually in an abuse situation. So the second thing is, once we realize, okay, it was not my fault, and two, my motive is for love and healthy relationship, then we can start doing mantra work. And I've had little mantras along the way. I've changed them all the time as I grow, that help me in the moment. So when I felt in the beginning when somebody was going to like squish me back down, because I was very aware of realizing that I felt like I had been in this box, and that the only time I was acceptable was when I was doing what somebody else wanted or being who they wanted me to be, which was usually for their purposes, nothing to do with me as a person or an individual. So one of the first mantras I ever had was that song in the 80s, that nobody's going to break my stride. And I would
Yes.
sing it. And whenever I felt like I was going back under, like one of the ways I described it was I felt like it was being held underwater and I was just coming up for air. Like, when I felt that oppression on my chest, I would say to myself, like, nobody's going to break my stride. Nobody's going to hold me down. Oh, no. And I and I would go with that, and then that was my mantra probably for 2 years. As soon as I felt that, oppression, I would sing it in my head. Nobody's going to break my stride. I'm going to go forward, and I'm going to heal, and I'm going to find the real me, not who they said I was, the real me. And those mantras have changed along the way depending on what I need. The Pink had a song, well, so what? I'm still a rock star. When I went through a grieving stage with my mother, I couldn't believe my mother rejected me, after I confronted her and said, like, all I want is mutual respect. And she never called me again. Um, and then, of course, my family reads my blog. I mean, I've been contacted by several people. In the last 6 months, one of my cousins contacted me in support of it, which was really cool. But anyway, I I would sing that rock star song. Well, you know what? Like, I'm happy, and it didn't kill me to draw boundaries because now I have life and I have it to the fullest, and I'm happy and I'm me. And that's another really big point. Not about the tools, but about the results, or the 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 gifts that we can get. I had never been me, so I wasn't really sure what I was working towards. And but this work work about the truth and uncovering those funky roots and setting those lies about me, the ways I had been defined by trauma, abuse, neglect, that weren't true. And by setting those back to the truth, one day I was sitting right here in this office, and all of a sudden I went, I'm me. And I just knew. And this little voice in my head said, how do you know? You've never been you before. And I just knew. I just know. And I also knew in that moment that I was never going to struggle with another depression. That was about 10 years ago now. I've
Mm.
never struggled with another depression. I have bad days. Some days, like I want to just go to bed. And if I want to just go to bed, I just do. I just say, I need a break. I need to take care of myself. And I was never allowed to do those things before because I was only as good as what I was doing for somebody else before. So,
Yes.
you know, that's the biggest benefit, I think, is just being able to be me. And I still have a purpose, but it's a purpose that's about sharing my love. It's not about being in service with nobody caring about my needs or me not even caring about my needs.
Yes. Yes. That's beautiful. Thank you. And I'm so happy you found you, because your heart, your voice really needed to be heard, because it's helped thousands of people. So you are such an awesome inspiration. So yay. So, Darlene, our time goes by so fast when you and I hang out. So, I know you have a thriving coaching business, and you've told me there's a waiting list. So, just to let our audience know if they do want some coaching, but why don't you tell our audience about your ebook, which I think you've shared is the Emerging from Broken, the beginning of hope for emotional healing, which is an awesome book for our audience to read. And then also, I know you have a free gift that you wanted to share with the audience. So I want to make sure we have time to tell our audience about that.
Okay, I'll address both those things. My ebook is a collection of my early writings. It's sort of how I built this foundation, and I write it in the way so that people can see how I came out of the fog, so to speak, how I realized this truth, how I realized that it wasn't me. And it's 197 pages. It's an ebook only available on the website, but it can be printed. And a lot of people print it. I get a lot of great feedback. A lot of people use it like a workbook. So they print it out and then they highlight and they make notes and they do their own journal alongside in a different book. I've it's I've had really great feedback.
Thank you, Darlene. That was amazing. So before we wrap up, I want to make sure we tell our audience about the free gift that you have for them.
My free gift is a little booklet called The Guide to Getting Unstuck on the Healing Journey. And it is the 10 most popular questions that I get asked on Emerging from Broken, my blog, my website, and also through the contact form and even on Facebook. There's these really typical questions that people ask me. So I compiled them and I answered them. And it's just a little downloadable thing. You can sign up for it. And if you don't, um,
We'll put a link.
what I was
We'll put a link underneath here, this video, so people have easy access to it. And of course, we want to encourage the audience to come to your emergingfrombroken.com website. And that's your blog too, right?
Yes, that's the blog. I have a Facebook page is mostly just like quotes and things, and then there's full articles on the blog about any quote that's by me. There's a full article on the blog about it somewhere.
Okay.
So there's like the articles on the blog, all with discussions, and altogether the blog has 40,000 comments, and it is read in 152 countries. So it's very, very big, and the comments are not like 100 words. There are like 500 to 2,000 words of people sharing their stories and their breakthroughs and their victories and their woes, and it's a really, really amazing body of work, not just by me, but by all these other people.
Mhm. That's beautiful. Isn't it amazing when you give people permission to,
Yeah.
share their story, to share, and that's what I love about you. I mean, I remember I followed you for a few years, but sometimes in the beginning when I started reading your blog, I'm like, oh my God, this woman's got guts. I mean, you say things that we all think, but nobody had the guts to say. So I know it was like, yes, finally someone is saying the things that we all wanted to say. And I know, from my experience, that's what really resonated with me from your message. So I can only imagine these people from all over the world. And isn't that so beautiful, Darlene? It's like, yeah, we all have our wounds, but underneath it all, the human condition is we all struggle in the same way. And when we can come together and share that on our path to hope and healing, we strengthen each other.
Yes. It's so true. It's so true. And like I I when I got out of that depression that I was in since I was 8 years old, I was in and out of depression from all of this stuff. And when I realized that was the root of it, I wanted so badly to tell the rest of the world that there was hope, that it was possible, excuse me,
Yes.
that it was possible to get over and through and on the other side. Sorry, I
It's
lost my
okay.
voice.
That's all right. That's all right. Exactly. I understand what you're saying, and I feel the same way, and that's why I'm doing this summit, and that's why you're on it again, Darlene, because you have a powerful story, you have an important opinion, strong opinion that needs to be heard. Because I know, like I do, that in my heart of hearts, I know we can heal, I know we can restore, I know we can figure out who is Darlene and who is Svava, and be real you, and light that spark then in other people. I mean, that's what you and I have done, and that's what the world needs more of. And we survivors, we're going to change how people view us by like not taking their nonsense anymore. It's like, wait a minute, you don't get to put that on me. Those are your thoughts and opinions. And I understand, because I have compassion for people that do that now. But it's just like, listen, I know myself. I don't need your validation.
Exactly. We can validate ourselves now.
Yes.
And that's that's a huge part of this whole thing, is being able to say, it doesn't matter what you say about me because I know my heart. I know my motive is for love. I
Yes.
know that I didn't deserve any of that stuff that happened to me. I
Exactly.
also know the blame belongs where it belongs. It doesn't belong on me or on any other victim
Yes.
of any kind of crime. And that was another thing. For some reason, I didn't think these were crimes because they were people in my family. They were, people that my mother knew or my father knew. They were not crimes because I was told to keep the secret, but they are crimes. They were crimes. They're illegal. I mean, I say to people, when they say, well, I deserved being spanked, or not, we're not talking about little spankings as much as beatings, and I deserved a licking. And I was like, so if you're in a restaurant and your neighbor reaches over and slaps you across the face or hits you with the belt, what are you going to do? And they're like, oh, well, I would charge him with assault. Well, yeah, why is that different? Because you were 5 when it happened, or it's not different. Assault is assault. And when I started looking at it that way, I realized the way I had coped wasn't helping me get to the next stage of my adult life at all.
Yeah.
It helped me to see that, yeah, I got beaten. I don't get stuck there, and blame is just a stepping stone. But it was the way that I had to go, like to put the blame where it belonged and
Yes.
cast the shame back where it belonged. It wasn't my shame. And when my mother said, don't you dare air our dirty laundry in public, it's not our dirty laundry. It's your dirty laundry, and it's my story. And I have a right to tell my story. My mom threatened to sue me before I ever started because I was speaking in public seminars, And she said, if you ever write anything that I don't like, I will sue you. So I phoned a lawyer and I said, can my mother, I was terrified. I asked her, can my mother sue me? And she said, not if you're not lying. She can try, but she's got to prove. And I made sure I have never written one word that I don't remember exactly what happened. I have lots of foggy memories, but I don't write about those. And also, you don't, and that's another thing that's comforting. You do not need very many memories to get through this whole thing, because what we're looking for is how your belief system formed about you. You'll see patterns once you start doing this work. You see patterns in it, and it all becomes clear about how you formed your self-worth and where it went missing. Well, we didn't form it, so we didn't put it in place.
Exactly. Exactly.
In the middle
Awesome.
of some
Yes. Well, like I know you and I have so much fun anytime we get on the phone. And as you know, yes, we're talking about some tough stuff, but you and I do it from the possibility of, that yes, you can take your power back. And I know you, when you work with your clients, you don't see their broken parts or their story. You see the strength in that person, and you know what it's taken them to get there. And I know you honor and celebrate that for them. So, well, thank you, Darlene, for being here, for your precious time with us. I know our audience is in for a treat with all this wonderful information that you're sharing, and I'm encouraging them all to go to your blog and your website and download your frequently asked questions, because we need to arm ourselves with all the right tools and all the support that we can get for the journey. So thank you so much for your time. And so for our audience, thank you again for joining us today for another great interview, and be on the lookout for more to come. Have a great day, everyone.